Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shambari, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. So now, ladies, are you also in Canada?
Yes. Yes, sir.
So you're adding to my Canadian bench.
Yeah.
You might now even be even with Australia.
Oh man, where'd you go?
It was Australia was leading, but now it's three of you.
Yeah,
As Canadians, you might have just got caught up.
yeah.
So now, folks, I know that this is the follow-up book. You're a principal now. What's next to Tom and Alex's book? You're a teacher now. How do you want me to introduce you? I of course, I'm going to introduce you by name, but do you have a business you want me to associate with your name?
Rita and I have a consulting business together, and it's called JAM, J-A-M, all capitals, Educational Consulting.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready?
We are ready as we're ever going to be.
All right. Okay. And then I'll do all my editing magic with AI afterwards.
So you can make me 10 years younger and
Yeah. Right after me, right after I'm 10 years younger as well. So,
And John's
although I'm
really-
happy.
John's really good too about sending the link out so we can share it out with others. So that'd
Yeah.
be
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. No, and thank you all of you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, I know. We're happy to do it.
So, folks, as my listeners might know or might not know, depends how much you've listened to the show, I myself was once a new principal. And while I felt that I was very well prepared in terms of instructional leadership and understanding the importance of systems and processes, one area that I felt, and no disrespect to my graduate program, but one area I felt needed to be a little stronger was truly understanding the hidden complexities of what it means to be a principal, particularly in my case, because I became a principal rather young. I was still in my early to mid 30s when I was a principal, and I feel I didn't necessarily have the wittedness, if you will, that I have, or at least I hope I have now when it comes to relationships. Because really, as Tom and one of my guests on the show tonight, we're talking off. You might be hired by a board, but you're fired by your staff. So with this in mind, I'm really excited to have Tom Hierck back. You might recall that Tom Hierck and his co-author, Alex Kajachani, who were the authors of You're a Teacher Now, What's Next, came on the show. I think it was season 1. Maybe season 2, to talk about what new teachers need to do to better prepare themselves for the experience. And so I'm really excited that the authors of the follow-up book are joining us today. Unfortunately, Alex is not with us because he is in the country of New Zealand and the time zones are a little bit different. But I'm very excited, like I said, to have Tom Hierck of Tom Hierck Consulting joining us again with 2 of his other co-authors of this new book, You're a Principal Now, What's Next? So we're also being joined by co-authors Rita and Shan Jorgenson Adam. And they are the co-owners, of JAM Educational Consulting. So Tom, Rita, Shan, thank you so much for joining me today.
just to quickly correct Rita Marler.
Oh, how do I pronounce that?
Marler.
Marler. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, for some reason, my New York accent also seems to be coming out at the moment. I don't know why, but my apologies, Rita Marler. So, Rita, Shan, Tom, like I said, thanks for being here today. Could you walk us through, and maybe Tom, you could start, why this follow-up book, You're a Principal Now, What's Next?
Yeah, I think, John, in your intro, you touched a little bit on this, right? And so as we transition through the various roles that the education sector provides us, what I think we're seeing is there's less and less opportunity, less and less capacity to bring people along. We're going through, I think, a demographic shift, which is seeing lots of veterans, like the four of us sitting on this call right now, leaving the profession. And there's a gap between who's coming in. We're getting people that are keen to come in, but with far less experience. And so going through, as the three of us and Alex were talking about, what are the things that aren't readily available, that don't have a place I can go to learn, that don't have a course, a series of instructional videos, anything that would come along. You and I were talking earlier about the key impact of relationships. That's significant because your relationship in a principal role, as many of your listeners will know, is vastly different than your relationship as a teacher role was, right? And sometimes we have people moving in the same school from one to the other. And they went from being very popular and having lots of friends to being friendless the next day and wondering what happened. So as we started thinking about the book itself, we started thinking, okay, so what are the pieces that there isn't much practice at? Relationships was one. Thinking about the vision, the mission that you create with your team. Thinking about communication, that school culture, that notion of being an authentic leader who walks the walk and talks the talk. Thinking about their own professional growth and learning. As much as people think, oh, this is all, you're going to have so much more time on your hands, you actually get less. You just get more responsibilities, right? And so thinking about all those aspects, we thought, okay, there isn't anything out there that clearly identifies, gives opportunities, gives examples, speaks from the myriad of experience that my co-authors have had in a really practical, I think, easy to read book.
I love that. And we're definitely going to talk, Tom, about those things in your book that haven't been delineated out, as you said, in courses or in other programs that new leaders really do need. But before we even go there, Rita and Shan, what prompted you to join Tom and Alex in writing this follow-up book focused on new principles?
Sure. John, Rita and I ended our careers as division office. Rita was the superintendent and I was the deputy. And one of the tasks we took on early in our partnership was to work with our school leaders. Even the ones that had a lot of experience just felt like they needed some things. And so we actually started what we would call a principal academy and then a vice principal academy where we intentionally worked monthly with our leaders on all of the aspects in the book that we touch on to help them to just deepen their work as school leaders and also to build connections with one another. And we speak to this in the book too, is being a principal can be a very lonely job. And so you need to be able to garner a group of colleagues that can surround you with support, and you can be vulnerable with them and ask them the questions without doing it in front of your staff, so to speak.
And as part of our work, we had brought Tom in as a consultant. And so he pestered us for a long time that we should be writing a book. And we were a little busy. Vision. And when we decided to go into consulting, when we were done, we were like, I think we should talk to Tom and maybe it's time to write that book. And so we got in touch and we talked through what that could look like.
And I'm glad you did, because now we're all talking. It's a wonderful opportunity to do. So now this book, as all three of you are saying, is really those nuggets that you learn through your principal academy. New leaders needed, both principals and assistant principals, things that were not necessarily in traditional leadership development programming. So what made the book in terms of those nuggets, those core nuggets that leaders aren't getting elsewhere, that your book hopefully will introduce them to and where they need to be introduced, and what didn't make the book. So maybe we could start with Rita and Shan, and then we'll go to Tom.
Like the previous book that Tom and Alex wrote, the book's meant to be like you're sitting across the table from one another, and a friend has just gotten a principalship, and they're like, help me, here I am a principal now, kind of thing. And so it is very much kind of all aspects that we could think of that are key to being successful in the role. But we were just at a conference recently and said to them, this isn't everything, but it's enough of everything to give you a good taste and to prepare you for going forward in this role. But it also is a good book where if you have been in the role for a while, if you sit down and you read through it and you go, oh gosh, I've been so deep in this work, I actually forgot about this piece, right? And it's even just presenting it at the conference, and we're working with principals and assistant principals in schools right now. There's pieces where you kind of get so embedded in one piece, you forget about another piece, right? At this conference, we basically had a workshop where we just kind of opened it up to what are your burning issues? Where are areas as a new leader you're feeling like you need support? And they started talking about school culture, but really it led back to visioning and Tom's whole chapter on visioning and the idea that your vision is how you make every decision and what you feed all your decisions through. Anyways, it touches on everything, and you can go deeper in everything, but it certainly gives people a good idea of what the work is for a principal.
I think that the key areas are there. Could you possibly touch on everything? No, because that would be a multi-volume work. And every day is different in the life of a principal, right? You never know what's coming at you. So there's always something that you're never going to touch on in a book for sure. But I think that the key concepts are there, and they lead to deeper discussion that might pick up other things that can stretch beyond the book cover.
Yeah, and I like how you were both talking about the centrality of vision and really having vision be that centrality. Because as you were saying, Shan, all decisions should be flowing from that. And it actually makes that a little easier because if it's not fitting that vision, then you shouldn't do it, right? Because as Rita was saying, there's so many things coming at you. That vision and having that clear vision, I think can definitely help put almost bumper rails up in terms of just our own insecurity as leaders. Oh, did I do the right thing? It just makes, I think, some of those decisions a little bit easier. Tom, why did you create or write this chapter specifically on visioning?
Yeah, it's one of those ones that, again, as Rita and Shan just talked about, really becomes central to everything we do, right? In the absence of a clearly understood, collectively owned why, you just see people just comply, right? So I don't want to get my principal upset, so I'm just going to nod my head at every faculty meeting and do this. And in my heart, I mean this, no, right? But I don't want to rock the boat. I might like my leader. This might be the best principal I've ever had, so I don't want to rock the boat, right? There's this mistaken notion that we ought to be trying for buy-in. And you know what? Buy-in, the opposite is sell out. So if all I get is buy-in, but I don't get ownership because I've not clarified what our mission is, I've not clarified where we seek to go, things fall apart, right? There's the honeymoon phase of the new principal too, where there's always some caution. Maybe avoid the people who welcome you the first because they might be the ones who want to change the least, right? And so is your vision clear? Do you have an idea? And have you now created this notion of ownership so that we can indeed use it as a lens through which we render every decision? If we don't do that, then it's going to be a fair weather statement designed for times of ease. And my goodness, we are definitely not living in times of ease.
And now, Tom, again, you said that this is going to define everything else you do as a leader. and that this is a good thing to do to know your vision or to get others on board with this vision, to have their ownership in the
Yeah.
vision. So it sounds to me that definitely should be one of the first priorities for a school leader.
Yeah.
What would you say if you had to either rank your chapters by do this first, second, third? What would you say? And this could be any of the guests.
Yeah.
What would you say should be the top three things you should do first as a new leader? So now, in terms of moving from the philosophical to the tactical and the practical, what would you say, in your opinion, your vast experience as superintendents, principals, if you had to, and I'm sure you do this as part of your coaching, if you had to coach a new principal and you sat them down and you said, do this your first 30 days, 60 days, and at the 90-day mark, what would you highlight?
I have to say, John, for every mentee or new principal we've worked with so far, that list is different. Yes, you need to have a vision, clarify that for us. And then basically it's, let's talk about what's going on in your building. What are things that you're wanting to work on? Let's do a walkthrough. Let's see how things are happening in classrooms. So there's no one list. Everything that is in the book could be a part of that list. Some of them might not be a part of the list, but it really is knowing the leader, knowing the school, knowing what's happening in the school that guides our 30-day plan.
There's a lot of factors that come into play. So if you're new to the building, definitely you need to get to know your people and what it is that drives them, what they see is happening in the building, what's good that's happening, what needs to change. So conversations are critical, but you don't just build relationships by talking, you do it as you work, right? And so you have to be moving forward while you're building those relationships, but certainly getting to know your staff and your community, your students, and that's got to be happening right from the get-go as well.
I like that. And in fact, we're definitely going to talk about listening while building and what could be some low-hanging fruit for building. One question before we get there, ladies, is you said that your 30, 60, 90-day work with school leaders, and Tom, you could interject here as well, is different based on who you're working with. So at the time that we're recording this, what would you say are the trends that you're seeing in terms of how school leadership teams and new leaders are developing? Like, where are their need areas, or what are communities deciding to focus on first?
Yeah, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I do think it's fair to say that we're seeing people enter these critical roles with less and less experience, less and less chops associated with being, right? I'm sure all of us can think of examples now where people almost engage in career-ending moments in the first 3 weeks on the job because they've assumed some power or authority that maybe needs to be developed before it's utilized. Not knowing the right sort of protocols, the right sort of steps to take as you are building team, as you are building your vision, as you are building the work, because you're entering this end of things with limited experience. Some of our remote places, John, I do some work in the far north. So I've got people who are in their second year of teaching, third year of teaching, being given the keys to the principal's office. Now, bless their hearts that they're willing that on because nobody else will. But my goodness, in the absence of some formality, some direction, some support, some encouragement, whether it's a book, a video series, my colleagues going up and working directly with you, so that becomes a critical piece when we start to gauge where are you at. Part of that is, what are you arriving with, right? If you're arriving with nothing, then we're going to have to build from a very basic foundation, right? So I think that becomes a big component of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with Tom. And I think too, that a piece of it is we're really good at doing all this, what we would call upfront work, the courses, the training, the whatever. And then we think, oh, they've passed it. And then they go into the school, and then we just leave them on their own to, in some respects, flounder, instead of saying, okay, you've had kind of the formalized training, but now you're actually in the school doing the work. We need to be in there regularly, meeting with you, talking about you, supporting you in this very complex work that you are needing to do.
And then what would you say school systems, if let's say it's a public school or even if it's a private school, if there's a difference, what should the systems be doing to support principals? We talk a lot about what systems need to do to support teachers, but what do the systems need to do to support principals?
No, but Shan and I certainly in our work believe that was our role as the senior admin team, was to be building the capacity of our principals and assistant principals. You can always get bogged down in paperwork and meetings. That's absolutely the case. But I truly felt as superintendent that my role was to be in my schools and helping build capacity, because the research shows us that principals have the greatest impact next to teachers on student achievement. And if we're not concerned about that, what are we doing in this field, right? We see now, certainly across Alberta, some divisions doing that work, trying to do that work. Others maybe have limited resources, and so some hire consultants like us to come in and do some of that work. But I would say there's quite a few that there isn't that support.
Even myself, I mentioned that as a new principal, I felt like I was floundering. I had an assigned mentor, but I never saw my assigned mentor. So I really didn't have a mentor. So that resonates with me even from a personal standpoint. Now, Tom, ladies, you were talking about giving principals supports. You were talking about Rita being in the school as superintendent and being right there to support your principals as the superintendent, that the paperwork came second. Both Rita and Shan, you were talking about your principal leadership academy. I know, Tom, you've done a lot of work around supporting cohorts of leaders. If there is a superintendent out there listening to the show, what would you recommend, or how would you recommend that the superintendent design it? I don't know if we would call it a mentorship program or a training program for their school leaders. What would that look like?
Yeah,
Well,
these two have done that, and they've done it very, I think, just before they jump on, I think you touched on it, John. It's got to be done with some level of authenticity. If we're just going to go through the motions and say, look at us, we have got a 6-month program, it's no different than a first-year teacher. You ever go and talk to a first-year teacher? How's it going? What are they going to say? It's awesome. I love it. Why? Because as a first-year teacher, you want to be a second-year teacher. As a
Yeah.
first-year principal, you want to be a second-year principal. And rightly or wrongly, this notion of being vulnerable escapes you unless you have this authentic view that my leader is genuinely interested in me, that they find time, they make time for that relationship, that they nurture it with some degree of value attached, rather than simply making it a budget item, saying, here's what we do, and everybody goes through, and at the end of it, we give you a piece of paper that says you've now done 6 months of Tom's intensive training.
I would say that in another role, Tom, where I was supervising school leaders, I made an effort to go to each of their schools once a week. And I also quickly learned that even though central office had a long list of things I needed to work with the school leaders, I put that second. And 2/3 of the meeting was what they wanted to talk about. And then that last third of the meeting is what I needed to talk about in terms of compliance. But I really wanted to put that emphasis on developing the relationship with the leader and ensuring that even if we did have quote unquote district mandates, we implemented those mandates in a way that made sense for that particular school community.
No, perfect sense, John. And I would say that's how we handled it when we were in our office, was just like we say in our book, and two principles, you need to have your weekly schedule and have this much time in all your teachers' classrooms, supporting them and observing them. We did that as a division office. First thing we did was block the time that we were going to be in schools, meeting with our principals, supporting our principals, and doing that work with them. And we also really promoted having our school leaders build relationships with each other, because there was some pretty strong people out there in our buildings, and they could lend support to one another in different ways too. So it was like, okay, Tom's doing this in his school. This is something that you really need to see. We're going to give you some time so that you can go visit Tom in his school and learn about what he's doing, right? And I think too, as leaders, we had to be humble and have them see our vulnerability too, so that they could trust that we were truly there to support them to get better at the work that they were doing. And we find that now, even when we're in schools, hey, we're here and we're here to support you. And we just want you to be able to do your work really well, because it's going to impact learning for kids.
And I think too, that when Tom mentioned about the vulnerability, we deliberately separated our principals and our assistant principals to work with each group separately, because principals sometimes don't want to admit what they don't know in front of their assistants, right? And the same with assistant principals. They don't want to ask questions that are going to maybe make them look not so with their principal sitting in the room. So we really created an environment where they felt safe to ask us questions. This is what's going on. Let's talk about what are we seeing. So there's a lot of vulnerability there, but they felt secure in that room, that we were all there to learn together and learn from each other's ideas. And so we made a deliberate and intentional plan to separate them, cover basically the same kinds of materials, because we want our assistant principals to grow up to be principals, but we didn't want to do it together. We wanted to give them that opportunity to feel safe and to question and take risks.
Tom, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think because it is such a different role, and I don't know that people understand how different it is until they actually get in there, right? Part of it is knowing what you don't know and being okay to voice what you don't know, right? I think rightfully, every teacher has a view of what the role of a assistant principal or principal is. There may be some degree of accuracy to that, but oftentimes there's a lot of stuff that gets done that as principal, I was not able to share with a lot of you, right? John's needs were different than Shan's needs, that were different than Rita's needs. I don't go and broadcast all of that, but you really are compelled to give way more than you've given in any other role to this role. You're never going to leave early. You're never going to get the same breaks, the same holidays, you need to understand that it's not just about all of a sudden you have the ultimate power to make those decisions. It's that understanding that every decision you make impacts something else. They're never going to be made in isolation. And so knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know becomes critical in that role. And that's again where that leaning into the dialogue, right? That notion of modeling. I always used to tell my principals when I phone the school, I don't ever want to hear, she's right here. I want your office people to say, not available right now. They'll get back to you. If it's critical and it's an emergency, I'm going to let your folks know. But otherwise, I'm going to put a positive check mark by your name and saying, yep, doing what they're supposed to be doing.
And I think it's funny, when you were talking, Tom, I was reminded, I don't know who said this, but we often are promoted to our level of incompetence, meaning we're promoted to these roles as principal leader because we had impact with students and student growth and achievement usually.
Yep.
And that's great. But now our role is to align instruction primarily across multiple adults. So we're going from working with students, with children, to now collaborating with adults and aligning those best practices, not just in one classroom, our classroom, but across multiple classrooms.
Exactly.
So to your point, you got to know what you don't know. And hopefully new principal programs are highlighting, hey, new principal, yes, you're here because we have faith in you. We believe in you. You've had success, and we think you're going to have success here. But you have to know there are some pretty big shifts in the scope of your work.
And now add to
Mhm.
that, as many of us have experienced, being in smaller communities, where not only do you know a bunch of stuff that you wish you didn't know.
So, in terms of being a new principal, where would you place instructional oversight? We talked about visioning being core. Where would you place instructional oversight and relationships, and how do they relate to one another? And this could be for any of our guests.
I think, and this is just my own personal remembrance, when I first became a principal, I thought everyone taught the same way I did, planned the same way I did, had the same skill supposedly that I had. And then I started going into classrooms and seeing that people that I was to be an instructional leader of maybe weren't as well planned or as well had as many strategies or weren't as sound instructionally as I had actually thought they would be. And so that I think that's a piece for new principals is it's maybe a bit of a surprise or a shock when you start going into some of if you're in a school where you're with people you've taught with before to see what your colleagues are doing instructionally. And I think the other piece that we found for new principals, it's very hard. Those first kind of critical, crucial, difficult conversations are a little hard for them to manage with their colleagues. Would you?
Yeah, I agree. I think that what we found with our principals, and when I did my doctoral degree, I looked at the instructional leadership role of assistant principals. And what came out of that and from our experience was that they really don't have the confidence to be going into classrooms and telling someone, because maybe they're elementary trained and now they have a physics 30 teacher and they're like, but I don't know anything about physics. I can't get them feedback. And so it was really about building that confidence to say, yes, you can, because you know what good teaching is. You know what the strategies are to engage students and those kinds of things. So you don't have to be an expert in every subject area, but you need to know what constitutes good teaching. And they lack, and I would say it wasn't even just our new principals, our veteran principals really lacked the confidence to feel that they could go into any classroom and give them advice, right? And so we really worked around that by saying it's really more of a conversation. There will be ones where you need to directly speak to something, but lots of times you have fantastic teachers and you need to give them the opportunity to talk about their practice because that allows them to reflect. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to give you really sound reflections that you can just question and say, oh, what made you think that? And really let them have the opportunity to talk but they need somebody to come around once in a while, give them a pat on the back and say, you are doing a great job. That's a fantastic strategy. Good for you. But let them talk, right? And so it's really about, you don't have to be the expert in subjects. You just need to know what constitutes good teaching.
Yeah, if you think about this, when are we ever truly evaluated as a teacher? So you go into your pre-service, your university training, and you get evaluated there as to whether or not you get your teaching license. But really, what is that evaluation based on? Probably the most foreign concepts that you will never apply in a classroom. You submit a 17-part lesson plan, will be so structured. You're going to take the first 45 seconds to intro. Then you're going to ask 3 stimulating questions. That'll take you no longer than 5 minutes. Remember those? We did those beautifully. And you
Yeah.
never used one of those in a real classroom because the first kid walks in and vomits. And that wasn't part of what we're supposed to do. So we don't. And so you go through your interview, you get hired at the school, but you're hardly ever put through the motions. So now you get to your classroom. And if your principal rarely, if ever, visits, you get locked into teaching in this certain way. So to Shan's point, I think everybody's teaching like me, but I really don't know because we don't ever have the conversation. To Rita's point, then, the fear that starts to emerge, I don't teach band. I don't know look, any one of us could walk into a class and instantly know whether or not the kids were engaged, instantly know whether there was any structure, instantly know whether there was some capacity of the adult at the front of the room demonstrating that they wanted to be there, right? No, you know what? I might not be able to tell you what you need to do with the one kid who's sounding a flat note on their trombone, but, right? I'm going to know for
Yeah.
sure if you had that kid do the same thing 10 times in a row without any instruction, that was pretty poor teaching.
I
That confidence piece speaks to it.
Rita's probably sick of hearing this story because she hears a lot of my stories more than once. But one of my favorite all-time professional experiences was having a student teacher. And she was actually a gift to me because she was the why are you doing that student teacher. So everything I did, she was always saying, why are you doing that? And I had to stop and think and reflect on my practice. And if my answer to her why wasn't because this is good for kids and this is helping them to deepen their learning, then I shouldn't have been doing it.
Yep.
And how hard is it to just say, why? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
I love that. One of the areas that I struggled with as a new principal was dealing with parent issues and making sure that parents felt heard and that I was supporting them and the community and what the community needed and wanted from my school. And then also supporting my teachers, particularly when those two things were at odds. And maybe this gets to that relationship piece. I found that to be a little bit of a struggle. Are you finding that the leaders you're working with today, if that's a similar concern, how do you help them through that?
I think it comes back to articulating your vision so they're really clear on where you're going and why you're doing the things you are. I talk a lot with the people we work with about creating the narrative. You need to get your story out so that people understand what you believe the work is in your school and how you're moving forward with it. When parents understand that, so they see that through your newsletters or your Facebook page or whatever that is, and they know what you believe in and stand for, then you can meet with them, you can listen to them. But if what they're asking you to do goes against what your vision is and the direction that you've set with your staff, then you can articulate that because you've been clear right from the get-go. This is what we're doing. But you need to validate, right? You need to say, I hear you, I understand that, but this is why we're doing this, right? And it's hard as a new principal for sure to have the gumption to do that. But your staff need to know you have their back if they're doing the right work. And if they're not, then that's a conversation on the side after, right? But you need to validate what people tell you, whether they're parents, community members, your teachers, your students. Listen to them. I always find it's really helpful to paraphrase back to them what they've said. What I'm hearing is this, but then you still have to stand up for what you believe in and the direction that you're going. So again, it comes back to your vision work.
Yeah. And the reality is if you don't clearly articulate that, somebody will articulate it for you, right? If the
That's
story
right.
told about your school isn't the one you want, why are you not telling the one that's accurate? Because somebody will pick up the charge, and whether it's parent community, whether it's the social media gossip chain, whether it's a disgruntled colleague, if you aren't clear and you aren't addressing that out of, this fear that I need to be liked more than I need to be effective, then we've got a problem.
And I used to say to my staff and my parents, you're our public face. And with my school council, I go through what our vision was, our plans were, our goals were for the year, to the point ad nauseum that they could repeat them back. And then I'd say, you are the ladies who are out in my parking lot every morning. If you're hearing someone that's concerned about something we're doing in the school, you know what we're doing. Please talk to them about it and send them to me so that everybody is always on the same page about this work.
I think too, some of our best principals, when they heard an issue like that out in the parking lot or somebody saw something on Facebook, the most effective ones were the ones who phoned up the parent and said, please come in. I think we need to talk, because email, things get lost in the tone, the message. So having that face-to-face is really critical.
What's the book, or how did the book change from when you originally envisioned it to what was published?
That's a good question. I want to get back to what Shannon said earlier. We really tried to structure this as, again, that conversational sort of tone piece. I've got this job. I don't know what to do next. What are some things that I'm missing? I think, not to brag too much, but I think the book ended up being the book we wanted to write. I don't think there's a lot of things that are missing there. To the comment that was made earlier as well, I think it's also become a book now where veteran principals are taking it and saying, wait a minute now, I used to do this and I need to get back to doing this. And maybe this is the piece why I'm struggling right now. So at the end of the day, again, not to brag, but I think, and ladies jump in, I think we hit where we wanted to hit with this one.
I think so too. I think from the very first outline that we worked on, and it just came together. And I think Solution Tree was totally behind us in bringing this out in the way that we saw as our vision for it. Yeah.
And it's funny, John, because of course you write it and you read it while you're writing it, and then it comes out as the full manuscript, and then you read it again, and then you set it aside because 10 million other things are going on in your life. And both of us just went, hey, yeah, this is what we wanted to say and what we wanted new principals to hear. So, yeah.
Love it. What have I not asked you that you wish I did?
Yeah, I think again, John, credit to you. I think you do have a sense of what's needed in this, having walked in the role as well. I think the particular content, as always, we know this, right? It reflects our knowledge in the moment. I think we all reserve the right to get smarter. But, this notion, I think that if there is areas folks new are struggling with, it's incumbent on those of us who've been in the system for a while to offer as much assistance as we possibly can. To me, that's a far better solution than watching people struggle, knowing that there are ways that they can benefit from. Between us, gosh, we've got well into the hundreds of years of experience, right? And that's pretty useless unless we're willing to share, right?
That's that kind of validated.
Awesome. Shan, how can people find out more about you and the work you do?
Rita and I do have a web page. It's called Jam Consulting. And so they can hop on there, and same with just info at Jam Consulting. We're always happy to speak with people and do whatever we can to help them be better at the work that they're doing. One of the things we say in the book is when we reflect on our years in school buildings, our favorite job was being a principal. I loved it. I loved working with my staff. I loved the kids. Yeah. And so if I can help other people love it as much as I loved it, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Rita, how about you? Anything to add there?
No, just about the passion piece. And I have 2 grown daughters who are now teachers. And so to see them shine and love what they do, and know that we just did a project for the College of Alberta School Superintendents. And just listening, we worked with 9 districts in Alberta, and it was so reassuring to hear the good work that's going on. And we just want to continue to be part of that and help people wherever they're at to continue to grow. Yeah.
Tom?
TomHierck.com is the best way to reach out to me. I still love getting out there and being with colleagues and just hearing some really good ideas, right? It's the best part of the work we do. My daughter's a teacher. I can sit in her class for hours and just learn. Every time I interact with colleagues, it's about a learning opportunity. So it's always appreciative.
I appreciate all 3 of you coming on the show. Alex out in the hinterland of Zealand. Thank you to him as well for writing this book. Shan, Rita, Tom, again, thank you for your time. I hope my listeners reach out to our guests, pick up a copy of their book, especially if they are leaders. And as you said, Tom, it's not actually just for new principals or new school leaders. Existing leaders can take a look at the book and see if they're still being faithful to those core practices that are good leadership. So to the 3 of you, thank you so much for your time today.
John, it was
Thanks, John.
enjoyable. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.